SundownTE. Cody, many years of edged weapons, firearm, and MMA training, and you've seen him comment on some of my videos. You've seen his videos. Like, he's a great dude, probably the coolest Canadian that I've met. So I wanted to bring him on. Cody also is a first responder, right? You're a first responder medical.
I'm frontline leadership in healthcare. I actually do hospital security.
Wow.
So that's, you can imagine how hairy that is at a time like now.
Yeah. So before we started recording, Cody and I were talking about, there's just a sense that bad things, etc., always happen to other people else until one day you become that other person. So you always have to be prepared. You have to be prepared, like train, learn how to conceal carry, etc. Like, do things that you never know, man. And I wanted to start. I've talked about this before, but I've never been mugged, right? But one time I almost got mugged, and I never thought it would happen to me. Yep. So like, I just wasn't prepared. Like, if that guy was a little bit more aggressive, it took me about 5 seconds to realize what was going on, and then I responded. I was ready to fight him. But between that 5 seconds, if he like attacked me, I probably would have been robbed successfully.
Yeah.
So after that, I was like, okay, I am never gonna be in this situation again. And I started training martial arts again. I took like a big break from martial arts before then, but after that, I was like, I'm never gonna take a break like this again, because you never know, man. I was walking in a part of town I thought was pretty safe, and then suddenly this guy almost mugged me. But then, thank goodness, I still had martial arts training from my younger years that took me 5 seconds. But I'm like, oh shoot, and then I was like, all right, let's fight then if you want to go.
Yeah. There's a couple learnings there. One is like, you'd had a certain measure of martial arts up until that point, right? So you were prepared for certain situations, but when it literally happened right in front of you, the martial arts that you had trained had not been practiced in context where you'd be like, oh, this is the time to do that, right? Like when you're a kid and you're doing, high blocks and stuff like that. If that happened to you in a fight, you might know what to do because you've been through like 1,000 reps of that, right?
Yeah.
But when it happens in a situation like that where there's some ambiguity, where you're not quite sure, that's where things get hairy for even people that are theoretically well trained, because they've never trained it in a situation that resembles that. They're used to it being like, okay, you stand over there, put your mouth guards in, and then go, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, it's a really interesting thing.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to get your perspective on it, because something I never detailed when I first told the story that I'll detail now is the guy, I don't know how, he probably sensed this, but he caught me because I was actually kind of lost. Like, it was a part of town that was safe, but I lost my bearing for a second. That's when he came at me. So like, I've never trained under a circumstance where like my mind was just jumbled for a second. So that was probably another reason it took me 5 seconds. But like, you never realize like when stuff would happen. Like, what happened was I was walking into the subway, but then I'm like, wait, this is not the station I want to go. So I was coming out of the subway station. So I was like lost, and I was trying to like, which way is north, which way is west, and that's when he came at me. So I was like so many factors that, like you said, you've never been used to, because you're used to, okay, all right, throw punches, block, that type of compliance drill, or some other kind of kata, or occasionally light sparring. But you're not used to. You're lost. You're like, what the heck?
Yeah.
And then maybe like you're not digesting your food correctly, and then suddenly someone comes after you, who's like, yo, you got to smoke, and like pushes you and stuff like that.
Exactly, because like even guys that are, like we were saying before, even guys that are theoretically well trained, they're not used to necessarily fighting somebody who is also talking to them, who starts off the interaction with like, "Hey, dude, like, do you got the time or whatever?" So while I'm talking to you, I'm the bad guy, and meanwhile, while you're looking at me and you're trying to figure out what I'm all about, my buddy is maneuvering into position behind you so that he can jack you up. Or, we're about to do what we're going to do, even good fighters, they get kind of on the back foot when you add in those other factors, right? It's like that extra task layering, when you not only have to fight or maybe get ready to fight, but you also have to talk, you also have to think, you also have to move and be like, okay, what is this about? Is this about to be a fight or not? Meanwhile, the bad guy has probably already decided whether it's going to be a fight or not. He's just waiting for you to fall further into the trap before he springs it, right?
Yeah.
And that's one thing that we miss in pretty much all of our martial arts training,
Yeah, exactly. We as much as we're good at maybe reflexes, sometimes our situational awareness is still not there because we're not taught how to read the body language of like every different scenario, every different type of attacker, etc.
Yep. I'm an apprentice instructor under the ShivWorks banner. Craig hasn't signed off on me yet, but under his format of training, we have the criminal assault paradigm, which basically is just a way to describe to the average person who doesn't walk around in criminal predator mindset what criminal predator mindset looks like. And it's, like they tend to use surprise, they tend to use weapons, they tend to use more than one person. And how many people in the gym ever train with circumstances like that? And realistically, like I'm not talking about like, those Aikido videos where it's like 3 guys and the guy does the sweet, like whatever wrist turn and they all fall over, right? It's like imagine doing MMA against 3 people by yourself, right? Like those multi-man fights and stuff like that. That shit sucks. It sucks. Now imagine that you were minding your own business trying to get into your car and boom, here comes the right hand and the fight started and you're already, literally the fight starts like that, right? Whereas most of us have never trained in a situation where it's going to begin. Like I said, sparring starts with guys having, consent. Like we know we're about to fight. We're on the same, like we know what we're about to do. We've got equal initiative, right? Yeah. He's not starting before me and that sort of thing, right? Like that's where pretty much anybody can lose when they're up against factors like that, even if you're, like I said, like a good fighter.
Yeah, exactly. And before we talked, I was actually talking to one of my roommates about this. I'm just like, I'm even thinking about like, I'm learning how to step in boxing. How could I potentially, if multiple people came after me, I couldn't run, how could I use the steps in a way, so, like those were things to think about because like you said, a lot of times, even if you're doing MMA, you're just usually training against one person, you're not thinking about. But I know, like Cody, you've trained against multiple people. Like you train with edged weapons and stuff. That's why I wanted to bring you on because if we were to call something MMA, I would call what you're training even more MMA than what people usually think of, which is cage fighting. Your stuff, mixed martial arts. It's like edged weapons, gun. How do you disarm someone? Use like fighting, grappling, or someone trying to shoot you and stuff like that. Like if you guys are tangled.
Yeah, it's. Because MMA is just throwing all the elements of combatives together, right? So what we do in ShivWorks is we also throw in the pre-fight, the body language, the talking, the navigating your way verbally around the fight, or say the fight starts and you guys tangle and then you break apart and you're like, man, look, I don't want to do this. I'm going to call the cops. Let's just call it off or whatever. So we introduced that. And then, as you said, we introduced the weapons and sort of like how when they took like Muay Thai and BJJ and wrestling and judo and all sorts of boxing and stuff like that, and they slapped them all together. Each one of those things changed how you do the other stuff, right? Yeah. Like strikers had to be more aware of where their feet were and where their balance was for defending takedowns and stuff like that. It's the same thing when you plug in guns, knives, and talking, is that it affects more of the game. And there's basically just more to worry about, right? Yeah, like exactly. I might be fighting this dude, might be whooping his ass from like top position. Meanwhile, he's fishing my gun out of my belt because he felt it on the way down when we were tangling. He felt my gun on the front of my waistband, and meanwhile he's pulling my gun out, and I'm like, yeah, I'm whooping this guy's ass, I'm winning. And then he pulls the gun out without me noticing and puts a couple in my belly. Right? It's heavy stuff. It is.
Yeah, that's heavy stuff. And so, Cody, this makes me then wonder, what was your sort of martial arts journey? How did you get to this point? Did you start out kind of in traditional martial arts, or did you always kind of start out with this kind of like self-defense survival type of mentality?
Well, okay, so the first fight I was ever in I was about 8 years old, and I think, which side is the scar on? Oh, my wife, she's got her headphones and she can't hear me. I have a scar on one of my eyebrows from my first fight ever. I was like 8 years old. I was teasing a girl on the playground. Big kid that liked that girl, didn't like me. He came up, grabbed me by my jacket, spun me around and threw me by the back of my hoodie onto the sidewalk, the icy sidewalk, because it's in Canada, of course. So my forehead skidded across the sidewalk, blood everywhere. I needed like 8 stitches, and that was like the first fight I ever had. And of course, the thing about fighting in school is that it's relatively low risk.
Yeah.
Like, and my parents put me in Taekwondo like a week later. They were like, well, Cody's got to do something, right? I was always a little skinny, nerdy, glasses-wearing kid. I also had a big mouth, which wasn't great. So I fought a lot in school, like I said, which isn't like a real fight. But at the same time, I was smart enough to realize that when I was doing Taekwondo, and I got up to like black belt level.
Wow.
But by the time I was like 14, it means it's meaningless, right? It means nothing, Like if you punched me in the face at 14, I probably would have cried, know. Yeah. So anyway, I noticed when I got in fights in school or outside of school that even my traditional martial arts training that I had thought in my head was good, it wasn't dealing with the problems contextually, and it just wasn't helping me in the kind of fights I was getting in real life. So that was when I started reading like Bruce Lee and stuff like that, and I started kind of like expanding my mind outside of Taekwondo, which was the only thing that I really knew, and it was the only thing that was available on my small town of like 8,000 people. And then when I got, so I quit. I quit Taekwondo in high school. Hated it by then. Didn't want to do it anymore. It was basically just my parents were paying for belt testings. That was it, right?
Wow.
And it wasn't, like I said, I felt like it wasn't helping me in the actual fights I was getting into, because the fights weren't like, okay, he starts way over there and I'm going to range him with my sweet kicks and hit him with the turning back kick and stuff. It was like, we're here talking shit like this, and then it's hands on you. We're wrestling and pulling at each other and stuff like that. Taekwondo was not helping me for that.
Yeah.
So I was starting to kind of realize, like, wait a minute, this is, I'm not sure if this is bullshit, but I better make sure. So I started looking at, you know what I mean? So I started looking at all different martial arts, like old Japanese jiu-jitsu, and most of my exposure to other martial arts at the time had been through like internet searches and like video game stuff, right? I was like, oh, sweet. Like in that game, this character theoretically uses Sambo. Like that shit looks awesome,
Yeah.
And then when I got out of high school and I had some freedom, I started doing MMA because I actually got in a fight let me figure out how to put this. I was challenged to a boxing match at a party, and the other guy just annihilated me. He destroyed me. The thing is I was just so motivated to not lose and get humiliated in front of like 40 people that they were like, oh, because what happened was everyone's pissed up. You got a couple beers in you and not a lot of food. Yeah. And I was walking by a bunch of guys in the basement, and there was this one kid from South Africa there, big, stout, tough kid. And I mean, people from South Africa are fucking tough to begin with, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The guy flagged me down. And he was like, hey, Cody, you know how to fight, right? I was like, fuck yeah, of course I do. I had no idea. I was like 17. I had no fucking idea how to fight. I had no idea. I had no idea what I was doing. Yeah. So I was like, yeah, fuck yeah, I know how to fight. So, okay. So they threw these. I don't know where they produced them from, but they've got us big boxing gloves on. And me and this guy went at it. And he fucking pulverized me. Like all he did was come straight at me and just throw his hands as hard as he could. And he destroyed me. I literally had no answer for I had no way to deal with that kind of pressure because that was not what we do in Taekwondo, right? It was worse than any it wasn't worse than any fight I'd ever been in at school, but it was a beating, right? Yeah. And eventually I was fucked up, and I just basically just like bit down as hard as I could and just like closed my eyes and just swung as hard as I could back whenever he came in after that. And I actually knocked him down, and he got up and said, I'm not doing this anymore, and he quit.
Wow.
It's like I said, it wasn't because I was tough or better than him. It was literally just I just threw as hard as I could with my eyes closed. I said, oh my God, he's going to come in and hit me again. And then I just threw, and I happened to hit him a couple times, and everyone was like, whoa, right? But in my head, I walked out of there like, oh my God. I was like, I was like, God, this all my training has been for nothing. Like if I can't even beat a guy in a fair scrap, with boxing gloves on, like I'm worthless. And another guy at the party there, he pulled me aside and he was like, dude, you fucking suck. And I, and I was like, because I was like, well, I mean, I did beat him. And he was like, no. Like, if you want to learn how to fight, come do kickboxing and MMA and stuff like that with me. So, and I was like, and that was like when I was like 17, 18. Mm-hmm. So that was how I started doing kickboxing and MMA and stuff. And I did that for many, many years. And at the same time, like I said, I was starting to get woke to like martial arts bullshit. Yeah. And the MMA stuff was good. It was awesome. I liked it. But it wasn't scratching the itch that I had for like the self-defense non-sport stuff, because I knew that was also a reality of fighting, right? Because even doing MMA, it wasn't the same as fighting people in real life who were talking, maybe throwing sucker punches and stuff like that. And I'd never been attacked with a weapon or whatever, but I thought, guns were cool, knives are cool, so why not do that stuff too? And then through just a lot of work and research on the internet, I discovered ShivWorks stuff and my coach Craig Douglas, and that's how I got down that path, and I've been doing that stuff basically ever since. So yeah, that was basically that was how it began for me. I was able to learn. I guess the most important part there is I was able to learn very early and in a situation that didn't have a lot of risk, that certain kinds of martial arts, or rather certain training methodologies, didn't work. Yeah. My coach Craig, he learned that like almost being killed.
Wow.
So like you for example, right, when you had that stumble, like the maybe not issue with the muggers, if you had screwed that up, you might not be alive right now.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
And that's the kind of stakes some people are operating under. Yeah. And I was fortunate to not be in that position.
Definitely. Anyway, the window's rattling, so I'm going to close it real quickly, but I have a lot of thoughts for this. This is great. 1 second. Sorry about that. Santa Monica beach wind. It's, no complaints there. It's beautiful. The wind's coming in from the beach.
What's the temperature?
Probably 70. Let's look right now. Temperature. It's been kind of cold recently, which is really kind of sad because it's only 55. That's the thing. Like normally it's not 55, but because it's colder than people are used to in LA, people are just getting sick anyways. Yeah. So like a lot of people are getting sick and their immune systems are already tired because we're all panicked. So a lot of people are getting sick thinking they have this disease even though they don't. It's
stress
crazy.
Reduces your immune responses.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So the first thing I was going to say, very related to your story, is that my parents put me in Kung Fu class. So this was in kindergarten, by the way. I was running in the hallways in Chinese school. Yeah. This was in Chicago. And I collided headlong. I think that's how you say headlong. I collided headlong with another student head first. So we both collided. Our brains bounced in our skulls, and I had a standing concussion. Yeah. And I've never been concussed before, but in a way it was good that I got concussed that early because like you learn, okay, I cried, right? My dad's a very traditional, like alpha male type of Chinese parent, so he was so mad at me for crying. He didn't care that I got hurt. He in front of everyone, he's threatening to kick my ass for crying. But like after that, they realized, okay, well, if that ever happens again, and thank goodness both of us had a standing concussion because we collided forehead to forehead. But imagine if in the future there was some kind of incident like that and like a fight ensued instead of both of us colliding and KOing each other. He has to be prepared. So my parents also put me in Kung Fu because they're like, okay, it was kind of like a draw between them, even though it was like they didn't really fight. It was just an accidental draw, accidental double KO. But in the future, they have to like Jerry has to be prepared. So that's how they put me in Kung Fu classes. Yeah, and it's so funny. It's like we all have like similar incidents. Like usually it takes like a beating or an almost beating or something for either the kid himself or the parents to be like, okay, that kid needs to be prepared because
Yeah. And I mean, at the very least, training when you're a kid. I mean, you might not learn a lot. You learn some balance, you learn some body awareness and stuff. Like I found that being in Taekwondo, at least prepared me a little bit for what I would experience in Muay Thai later, which is another embarrassing story. Like my first Muay Thai class, I got the dog shit beat out of me by like a little 40-year-old housewife who just same thing. She just I don't know. She must have been having a bad day. Maybe I looked like her husband who left her or something like that. But I was like, yeah, kickboxing, I can do this. This is easy. And then it's time to spar. And like I said, this little like 45-year-old housewife just comes straight down the pipe, boom, boom, just destroyed me. And I was like, oh, fuck, okay. Wow. But just like I said, it was just that the things I had not been prepared for in my traditional training. You know, it was just another one of those things that I look back on and I'm like, oh, thank God I was able to learn that lesson in the gym, you know, or in the schoolyard versus like in real life.
I will also call out that training partner, she was being very unsafe doing that to you, like your first kickboxing class ever.
It was not cool. It was absolutely not cool.
Yeah. And we've all been there. Like the part of the reason why I had a little neck issue is because I was rolling with a guy in jiu-jitsu and he just like went too hard. I told him and he just went too hard. He tripped me. I whiplashed. So like I told him I'm not some expert. I'm just a dude who's been training a little. And he was professional. He was a professional MMA fighter. So like I become more aware of like there's just certain people who just don't have the intention of learning. They're just having a bad day or trying to get an ego trip, and it's unfortunate. And for everyone watching, like really be careful. If you get any red flag, just like it's okay to be like, dude, I'm sorry, I just don't want to do this. So like it's always better to communicate and just to walk away.
Yep. It's I was actually talking about this with the head man at Old School Jiu-Jitsu on Friday, and that part of self-defense is preparing yourself to live that long life and not leaving the gym a cripple, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like the day that you leave the gym with a jacked up neck or a jacked up knee or a jacked up arm or whatever could be the day that you get jumped in the parking lot, and then you're going to be one arm down or one leg down, not to mention like in terms of longevity, you got to slow down your training when you're heavily injured later on, blah, blah, blah. I just think, training in a sensible way that's going to keep you in it longer is also part of the self-defense perspective, if you care about that at all, right? Like a lot of these guys, they get to the gym, they just want to have a couple MMA fights and brag about it, right? They go in, they start when they're 20, they're done by 30. They're that's it, right? Like they're their brains look like sponge, and all this and that, right? Like all those aspects, though, right?
Yep. I totally agree with you, and that's why when I was thinking about how to resume training, I thought about the same exact thing. I'm like, I'm training one, so I can kind of keep doing my MMA, martial arts, comedy, reporting stuff that my channel's known for. But the other things, I want to do it for self-defense purposes. So if I keep getting hurt, I can't afford it. So it's like, okay, let's keep learning, keep expanding my knowledge, but let's just be very smart about this in the future. So yeah, I agree. There's like a self-defense aspect that's not emphasized in a lot of these sports, even like a very legit sports and martial arts, that just like you have to remember, like not everyone wants to be a combat fighter. Not everyone wants to, like brag about having a few fights. Some people just want to learn how to deal with some dumb person on the street, or maybe they want to have the courage to be like, okay, if someone's like giving me BS in the store, I can stand up to them, but also like know how to keep my distance and stuff, and then always know how to back away, etc. Like it's almost like there's almost like maybe a trichotomy. I don't know what the right word is, but it's like there's three types of people now that train. One type train, they're completely bullshito. One type train, and they like want to become like some kind of like sports athlete or something. And then there's the third type that's more like kind of more self-defense, trying to like be useful with their training. But the problem is a lot of that like self-defense people, they get bunched up too much with like the bullshito people, and the reason is because there's a lot of overlap in that. But like the people I surround myself with, like the majority of people I surround myself with, like even you've seen Coach Paris on my channel, Rob on my channel, I think they're a lot more kind of self-defense focused. Even Clinton, they're a lot more self-defense focused than like, okay, let's like become jiu-jitsu champions or jiu-jitsu black belts, or let's be Muay Thai champions. And it's like a lot of times there's there's not that kind of like the audience doesn't see that sometimes. And like Coach Paris, for example, sometimes doesn't want to come on my channel because he has like 5 black belts, but he wants to teach people to be safe, and then people are always calling him out on, oh, this technique doesn't look perfect, or this, that, and he's like, that's not the point of why he's getting those black belts or why he's calling himself Coach Paris. He's not trying to teach people to be MMA fighters. He wants to teach people, okay, if you get in a jiu-jitsu fight, okay, I know how to win, I know how to run away. If you get into a kickboxing match, how do I fight and be safe? Like
There's an interesting logical disconnect there that you kind of pointed out, is that a lot of people now with the rise of the UFC and combat sport and stuff, the stuff that's going on in the martial arts community now, and people are getting kind of woke to a lot of bullshit because you can produce stats and you can produce fights and you can produce a lot of evidence to support your position now. But there's still that disconnect that people have associated being good at MMA with being like the best fighter in any circumstance, right? I think it was Jocko Willink said that just because you're like a great MMA fighter doesn't necessarily mean you'd be a great SEAL, like a great Navy SEAL, right? And sometimes the skills required to prevail in a non-sportive fight are completely different than the skills you would need to prevail in a sport fight, right? Because you need some technical awareness, you need some pre-fight positioning and verbal skills, you need some awareness, and that stuff could defeat the fight before it ever happens, right? Whereas a lot of people now they see you can tell I'm like a 90s kid, because I'm like, when you see Vanderlei Silva beating the shit out of somebody, Vanderlei doesn't beat the shit out of anybody anymore. But when they see that, they're like, okay, that guy's the best fighter and he's good at everything, and that's all I need to be ready for a fight. But it's not, right? If it was, people would just do that and they wouldn't carry guns, knives, pepper spray, and that sort of thing, right? So exactly. It's a dangerous thing to. It's a dangerous attitude to have, that like, well, just because you cowboy up and go to MMA a couple times a week, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're gonna make it when you get attacked by 2 guys in the parking garage afterwards, right?
And there's an old saying, I don't know who said it, but like, you fight how you train. So if you're fighting all the time, all right, when I'm in trouble, I clinch, or when I'm in trouble, I will take him to the ground. That's how you're gonna fight in the street. And that is very dangerous. I remember it might have been Fight Quest or one of the other, those back when they did those really cool shows. I haven't seen something like that in a while, but where they would like learn different martial arts, like the host would learn different martial arts. There's this guy who like went to Israel to train like legit Israeli Krav Maga, not like the crazy BS stuff that we see a lot nowadays.
Yeah, but not like the mass marketed stuff.
Yeah, the mass marketed Krav Maga, exactly. So he's training legit with like Israeli special forces, or probably their publicity arm, not real special forces, but the arm of their special force that can like talk to
the front facing.
Yeah, the front face, exactly. And like, there was a drill he'd do. It's like you're on the beach, you're trying to get to the objective, and people are coming at you, right? And then basically every person that comes at the MMA fighter, the American MMA fighter, he ends up going to the ground with them, and then the coach keeps going, stop going to the ground. You have an objective. You're trying to get there. You're not trying to tangle with everyone. Yeah. And then the coach couldn't explain, because the MMA guy's been training. Whenever someone's clinching with you, you take them to the ground or whatever. Or you like keep clinching. And so, he keeps taking every fighter to the ground. And the Israeli coach is getting so angry. It's like, dude, what if one guy throws sand in your face and another guy catches up to you? Now you have 2 guys fighting, and they kept telling him that. And he's like, oh, and he's starting to know it at the end. But it was just like so funny.
So one of the drills that we do in the ShivWorks Edged Weapons overview class is at the end. That's the one you have to fight 2 people, and you start tied up with one guy, and the other one is like the lookout, basically, right? He's not in the fight yet, but he's about to be in like 5 seconds.
Wow.
So if you commit yourself to that clinch, or if you say took the guy, even if you hit the guy with like a beautiful clinch takedown or whatever, and you went down, literally all he has to do, and the bad guy knows it too, all he has to do is hold on to you until his boy shows up, and they're going to beat the shit out of you together, right? So when you get stuck into that grapple, That's the sort of thing that can happen. I'm absolutely not a critic of MMA skills as being useful for those non-sport fights, because as you can see from all the videos we've watched and stuff like that, there's tons of videos of people getting judo thrown into the sidewalk and just destroying them. Guys getting left and right straights, and that being it, that being the fight, right? The thing is that when we talk about the properly contextualized training, it's about finding the right place in the fight to use those sports skills, right? They're absolutely useful, but you have to have some kind of that kind of tactical and strategic awareness to know when to use them. For example, like Thai neck clinch, right? Amazing positions, like dominant, super destructive. Maybe not dominant, but it's super destructive, right? To just neck clinch somebody and just pulverize their ribs with knees. But I was reading a story about a guy from Brazil. I don't remember what city, but he was a bouncer at a bar, and he was used to Muay Thai training. It was the only thing he ever did was that pure gym sport attitude, and he was like, you know what? I end every fight the same way. I neck clinch him and just and knee him in the belly until he's had enough, right? Well, one time he was doing that to a guy because they're typical bouncer stuff, and the guy, he didn't realize that the guy pulled a knife out of his pocket and stabbed him in like the back here, like under the lat, deflated his lung. He almost died because, like I said, because maybe the neck clinch isn't the perfect solution for the street fight, where you've got to worry about weapons and hands holding bricks and guns and all sorts of stuff, right? So that's why in under the Shivworks stuff, we don't do head, we don't grab the head, and we don't do neck clinch stuff because it's too risky to let those hands be free and grab and hold whatever they want, right? But like I said, that guy had only ever trained in the sport, and that was what he was used to getting away with. In his mind, he was like, I'm just going to do the same thing I usually do. Well, that time it didn't work, and he almost died.
Exactly.
And
that is such a great story that everyone should hear, man. I'm so glad you shared that. And guys, I want you guys to go check out SundownTE's channel, SundownTE, that channel, because he has clips of this stuff. It's so fascinating to see how things change when it's asymmetric force involved. Wow, it's just crazy. And it's the only weapon story I've had a few, but the only really funny one I had was, I've told the story before, where it was back in China where someone attacked me with a chair, right? Attacked me with a footstool, and literally it's like, because I've never trained for it, all I could do is, okay, I have my footstool, I'm just gonna try to get him to not be in my range, which was the smart thing to do. But the kicker of the story was, as I was running away from him, he threw a water bottle at me, and thank goodness it missed me, but it flew so close to my face that I realized how much power it had. If it hit me in the back of the head, maybe I would have been knocked out. These are just, I'm glad it happened to me when I was young, but these things wise you up. You're just don't get into fights on the street, man. But to everyone watching, you never know, right? These are things even the traditional running away paradigm, it has to be adapted. I'm sure you have a lot of great kind of advice for that, but you can't just be okay, I'll get him away enough. Maybe he's out of my striking range, I run. That's not enough. You got to be aware. What if he's a gun or something? You can't just run away in a straight line, which is what I was doing. It's crazy.
That's there's a lot of times where people, that's one thing that I really don't like about the way martial arts discourse is conducted, is that you'll try and have a complex opinion that's based on all sorts of different information and stuff, and guys will be like, well, if you get in a knife fight, expect to be cut. That's fucking meaningless, right? That doesn't or just run away. It's okay, so if I'm being carjacked and my wife and baby are in the car, and I'm stuck in the V of the, sorry, I guess it should be this way. If I'm stuck in the V of the driver's side of the car and the driver's side door, and this guy's trying to pull me out of the car, knife to my face, should I run away with my wife and child in the car, or should I maybe get in the fight.
Yeah.
Right. Or if it's like a home invasion and, you know, your kids are in their rooms or whatever, where are you going to run to? Or really, are you going to run? But people don't want to admit that it's, or maybe they just don't like to think about it because it's uncomfortable and they feel like they're not prepared. So it's like, well, I'll just run away. Well, it's not always as simple as running away.
Or I'll just hope it doesn't happen.
Yeah. Like, and when I confront people like that who say like, you know, oh, well, just run away. But then I show them a video of a guy getting attacked in like a phone booth or like one of those like ATM stalls or whatever. And people will say, oh, well, I guess I just die. It's like, no, you got to have a plan, dude. You got to have you know, you can't just give up.
Yeah,
you know,
just give up. One thing I talk sometimes about procrastination on my other channel. Sometimes the best thing to do is, if it comes up in the moment, just like think about it for a second, and maybe next time it comes up, just get a friend and just try, just like feel it out. That'll get you to want to explore it more. I remember a very similar situation. Me and a friend, we were just watching videos for fight commentary breakdowns. We saw a fight exactly like you said. It was in a car. And then my friend's jiu-jitsu trained. He has more jiu-jitsu training than I do. But, you know, we started thinking, okay, what could you do in a jiu-jitsu type of situation? Because you maneuvered your legs, right? The car is small. So we were like playing around. Okay, let's pretend we only have enough space in a car. Like you said, like the V section of the driver's seat. Someone attacks you, you're in the car together now. And then we're like, okay, you can't really do a triangle. You can't really do an arm bar. You could potentially grab the head, but you have to at least explore the options. Like, and then we're like, okay, well, at least, I don't know if I'm going to turn my camera down, but like, you do have your knees here, right? So you could put his triceps, or not his triceps, you could put his biceps on your knee and like kind of control him this way. So like you can modify certain jiu-jitsu positions to kind of control him, but you have to explore stuff like that because I don't know about you, but I think the majority of people in America drive, right? The majority of people in Canada drive. So you never know if you're going to get into a situation where maybe someone forces you in your driver's seat to defend yourself.
You know, it's an important thing that you brought up there because I don't remember the stat off the top of my head, which is irresponsible of me, but I think it was like most criminal assaults that people encounter in their lives in America. And then like I think it's the top 2 segments are either at work or in and around their car.
Yeah.
Right. That's where road rage stuff happens, robberies, stuff like that. Because like, you know, getting in and out of your car, it's kind of, you tend to be a little bit out of it. You know, you're thinking about going to work, you're thinking about getting out of there, right? You're tired, you're looking at your phone, stuff like that, right? It just seems to, or like, you know, the Walmart parking lot sort of thing, right? Yeah. It's just fuzzy stuff happens in and around cars, man. And we have vehicle fight stuff in ShivWorks, and it gets fucking brutal, man. Like we're talking about like people like pinned up against the driver's seat, and you're wrestling over a gun here, and this guy's behind me, and I'm trying to push off the dash and squeeze him into the seat while he's trying to get my gun out, and I'm trying to defend it and stuff. And or like we call it getting shuttlecocked, when you get fed down into the I don't know what it's called, like the foot compartment, like where the pedals are and stuff. Oh. You can stuff somebody down there so they're like this. They're fucked. They're done. You can't, like, you can literally just stomp somebody into submission from there. Or like even if you're on the bottom in the car, you can still put your foot on somebody's neck or put your foot on somebody's hips and do all kinds of mean stuff to them, pushing their head up into the roof. Yeah. Like you can be wicked in the car because there's so much to push off of. Yeah. But he can also do it to you. Yeah. And confined space stuff is so like when you did that car stuff training, that also crosses over to say if you were pinned up against a wall and the floor. Yeah. Or if you were pinned up in like against like the wall in maybe like a parking lot stairway, stuff like that. Confined, you know, learning how to use that 3D space to push the other guy into or push yourself off of. Wow. That's a huge thing in real fighting, but like in the gym, we tend to not get a lot of that. Yeah,
you
know?
Totally.
So
Wow,
that sort of 3D space confined environment stuff is huge for like non-sport fighting.
wow. This
You know?
is fascinating. Guys, if you're not enjoying this conversation as much as I am, man, guys, but the other thing I wanted to add, one of Coach Parrish's friends is also like he's a Muay Thai Jiu-Jitsu trained guy who teaches self-defense based martial arts. He taught me something that I wanted to share with people. Again, take everything I say with a grain of salt. You can consult actual experts, but I always say that because some people never get that. They're like, "Gee, you claim you know stuff." I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm not claiming I know stuff. I just like this stuff, and I talk to people, and I train a little bit. And I just want to pass you what I've learned." But
Yeah.
you see the phone. It's most people teach you, don't be on your phone, right? But most people's phones have a very hard case to prevent it from getting damaged when it's dropped. Mm-hmm. So what most people don't realize is this is actually a pretty good weapon in self-defense situations. It was mind-blowing when you told me that, but it's true. Like most phone cases prevent like 6-foot drops. They're hardy, man. So smacking someone in the eye, smacking someone in the skull, this can do a lot of damage.
So I'm sure it could.
If you're getting attacked, don't be on your phone. The dumbest thing I see a lot of girls especially do, they get scared. They pretend they're talking on the phone with someone. Now you reduce your vision. You reduce everything, right? But take this phone, have it in your hand for self-defense purposes if it gets to that point. This is a pretty good weapon.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to get the that hard case right on the bridge of the nose. That would suck. You know? I mean, I wouldn't. I also wouldn't want to be in a situation where I had to press my phone into service as a weapon. But the thing is like, maybe you were totally situationally aware the whole day, and then you got a text from your buddy or whatever that he was in trouble, or your wife's like, "Oh my God, our house is being foreclosed on," or whatever, and you're just like, "Oh," and you just start dealing with that problem, and then that's when the bad guy is like, I'm going after that guy right now because he's not paying attention, right? It's sort of like that. The lion, if he can pick off the sick one, the limping one, the one that's not necessarily paying attention, that's what he'll do. He doesn't want to fight the big, tough, aware, prepared wildebeest. He wants to fight. He wants to go after the one that he knows isn't going to put up much of a fight because it's less risk for him.
Exactly.
So I mean, I believe. Awareness and stuff is like super important, but a lot of people they pay lip service to awareness. It's sort of like in a lot of sport gyms, a lot of people will pay lip service to self-defense, but they actually don't prepare you for self-defense. It's the same thing with awareness. A lot of people say talk about awareness, but they don't actually have an actionable plan for how to, I guess they don't understand how to be aware all the time, or how our focus and attention spans as humans work. Our focus is like a camera lens. It's all constantly moving in and out on tasks that we have to do. And those times when we're sucked in on something are the moments that the bad guys might be looking for. And it could be anything, right? Like you could be totally aware, and then you're getting into your car, you drop your keys, and bam, that's it. Right? So it's hard to be like aware 100% of the time. Every single person has those lapses.
Yeah, absolutely. There was this YouTube channel that I used to follow a lot. He doesn't do this anymore, maybe because for legal purposes he doesn't want to get sued. But he would just go on the street and just like get people's permission, be like, "Can we test how you would deal with someone with a knife?"
You know what? I've seen those.
And I love those videos because you really see that most people have zero plan. One guy was just like, okay, I'm dead now. He literally he got stabbed a few times. He's like, okay, I'm dead now. It's like but I love that guy would do that. And the most beautiful thing he would do is he would have his big like Eastern European looking friend wearing like full helmet and everything, so like the friend could take hits, and then that guy would be the attacker. It's like worst case scenario. It's like that's pretty cool.
That's and I mean there's the interesting thing there is that it's also set up sometimes to be that sort of like sporting contests as well, right? And there's also rules implemented. Like, for example, there's a video of one of these like self-defense guys shitting on like knife training, saying that like, oh well, your knife training or all knife training is bad for these reasons, and he's like, he's talking to one of his students or whatever. And he, talks him up against the wall, and then they have like a little verbal kind of back and forth, and he's like intimidating this little guy, and you can see him fish the knife out of his pocket, and then he starts sticking him. And my buddy showed that to me to try and like flex on me, to be like, oh, this is why your knife training sucks or whatever, blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't know what to do. And I was like, no, well, first of all, he reduced his mobility by getting pinned up against the wall. He let that guy get way too close, and he let the guy visibly fuck around in his waistband without doing anything, either completely disengaging or going after that hand. Because if we're about to be in a fight, if me and Jerry, you're about to be in a fight, and you're getting testy with me or whatever, and you start fishing around and you start picking at your pocket, start fishing around in your hoodie, I might not necessarily like start fighting them, but at the very least I'm going to be like, that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he
it's
was
like a cause and effect, right? For example, if you see me start going in my pocket, maybe you're going to start putting your hands up. You're going to start getting ready too, a little bit, kind of like this or something. Like you're going to respond, right? So a lot of those like demonstrations, they never take into that account. People who really are prepared, they're going to be responding to whatever signal. So it's not going to be just like 1 second nothing happens, next second he gets 6 shanks in him. But the unfortunate reality is that does happen too, and that's why you still have to train. You still have to train, okay?
Absolutely.
Because the adrenaline kicks in. You realize by the 6th or 7th or 10th stab you're stabbed. Now what do you do? Are you just gonna be like, okay, I'm dead? You still have to be prepared, right? So it's like people who say never train against knives or never train knife defense. That's like saying, okay, well, it's 90% ineffective, so we're never going to do it, right? Going to the moon, probably 9 out of 10 times it's going to fail. Let's never go to the moon. That's not the perfect analogy, but it's like good enough analogy. Like even if you have training knife defense gives you a 1 out of 10 time of escaping, that's better than 0 out of 10, which is what you're going to do.
Right.
You're just going to diss on it and not train it.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's one of those things where a lot of ego can kind of get involved, because people see you doing that stuff and they're like, oh well, I don't do it, so it must not be cool, or that's bullshit for these reasons, and they might not even necessarily have a knowledge base in that subject to be able to criticize it. But they just are like, oh well, it's, and I say, hey man, if you think it sucks, why not come give it a try? Why not do it and see what you think? And then that's the part where they're like, oh well, I got my own training to worry about and stuff. They always come up with some excuse, right? Yeah. But a lot of it is people just don't want to accept that they don't know, and the process of learning is going to be scary. It's going to suck. You're going to get beat up. Like we do sucker punch drills at the start of every ShivWorks, or not every ShivWorks, but most of them. And I have to stand in front of my coach while he's talking to me, and basically, and like for the sake of the drill, I'm not allowed to attack him first, right? It's sort of like an isolation drill, right? Yeah. So he'll stand there within punching range, which is obviously not what you want to be doing, but you might be in a situation where that's happening, right? Yeah. You might be in a bar or a hospital or an environment where you don't have a lot of room to maneuver, like in traffic or at the mall or whatever. And we'll just literally sit there in the pocket, and he'll talk to me and gesture, and then throw a punch, and I've got to be like, oh shit, pick up my default cover without getting hit. And I mean, it's not like he doesn't like destroy me. He doesn't like hum them in 100%, right? But he throws them fast but not hard, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
He still gets me almost every time, because it's so fucking hard to defeat that initiative deficit when he's allowed to go first. Yeah. And it's sort of if I was to correlate that to knife stuff, if I'm ever stuck in a situation like that in real life, and it's whether it's a sucker punch or a knife situation, at the very least I'll have a plan to go over in my head, and it won't be the first time I've ever been in that situation.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Because I've had people hit me before the fight, and I've also hit people in real life before, like in the, like I said, in that situation where we're like, maybe we're not sure if it's going to be a fight or not. Yeah. I've hit people first, and I've had people hit me first, and it's not the kind of thing you want to be doing for the first time when it really matters, right? Yeah. It's better to have some practice at that, so that you, and same, like I said, like you were saying with the knife stuff, your first experience of knife stuff, if it's literally when you're about to die, that's not a great place to start from, right?
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
so if you can get some good training, or at the very least, you can get your boys together from the gym or whatever, and get some training knives, or get some pens, or get some like nice big felt marker with the cap on, right?
Yeah.
Just try and poke. Just you can wrestle and try and poke each other up with it, and that's better knife training than 90% of people have. Because at the very least they've experienced what that's like, trying to navigate the knife arm when it's free swinging and like, oh shit, I lost my grip. So what am I going to do? Do I run? Do I choose now to disengage, or do I go after it? Right, that sort of thing. Anyway, my point there is just if you train it, you don't have to make it up on the spot when it's really happening to you. You'll at least have a game plan, right?
Yeah. I think another reason why some people really kind of shy away from some of those, I just call them asymmetric drills. I think that's a kind of a good way of describing them.
No, that's
is
good.
That there's unfortunately a lot of bullshit involved in that too. So it's just like, but I loved what Cody just said, what you just said about the fact that if you're afraid of the bullshit, which there is an argument for, if you get trained wrong in certain situations, it might hurt you even more than if you had no training at all. But if you're afraid of that, the counter is literally you and your boys just go and just figure it out, right? That's how some of the best martial arts came about. It's just you just figure it out, because you guys aren't going to be holding back. You guys aren't going to be influenced by any pre-existing bullshit. Just be genuine, but just try it.
Yeah. And the key there is that you also have to have a knowledge base of what that real encounter is going to look like, which is what most people don't have, right? Like you can see that with the knife training stuff, is that those guys that do like the really bad, 1980s karate knife defense.
Yeah.
And you look at it and I'm like, God, have these guys ever seen a knife fight in real life? And you know what? Maybe they haven't, right? You can go on LiveLeak right now and search basically any kind of like snuff film you want. You can see shootings and stabbings and all sorts of horrible stuff. It's like literally right at your fingertips, and you can let that change your perspective on how that stuff should be trained, right? Because you see the real knife fights, for example, they're frantic, they're mayhem. It's like a 20-second affair. It's like 90 seconds, right? It's like that really short blast of like super intense activity, and guys are trying to manage limbs and stuff, and it's and then you contrast that to the way most people do knife defense, and you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't look anything like that does. So that's what makes it worth nothing, right? But if you start from a position of being like, okay, this is our problem, this is a realistic framing of the problem, then you might get the right answer when you search for the solution, right? That's another thing that gets said in ShivWorks a lot, is that we have to first identify the problem and what it actually looks like in real life before we can ever come up with a workable solution to it. And that's the part that people miss a lot of the time.
And I think another thing, and why it's so important to train for these self-defense situations, is that a lot of the situations you have to be able to recognize nuance. In general in life, you have to be able to recognize nuance, which I think even YouTube has trouble recognizing nuance a lot of times with certain regulations they have towards content creators. So that's just my one criticism for today. But for example, I've told the story many times on my channel, but I once held a knife at someone before, right? This was when I was little in China. So I was not ready to use it. I was just trying to use it in a threatening way. Mm-hmm. So there's nuances. Some people, they might have a weapon, but they're not ready to kill you. So you have to
this is
to
important.
recognize, so that's another level of why you should train and think about all these situations, because maybe 90% of the time they have that weapon and they're not ready to use it. So you have to be able to figure out when that's the situation versus 10% where they're going to use it to try to hurt you or kill you, right? But you have to explore these situations.
Yeah. Yes. You know what? I've been working on a study for a long time. Basically, I took 100 clips of knife usage from the internet, from various sources, just like I said, like a 50, 100-piece sample.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been slowly working through them and building like a little database of like, did the fight start with somebody threatening with the knife, or did it start with the knife being used on somebody when they didn't know, or did it start with them already having it? Did it start with them pulling it out in the middle of the fight or slightly before the fight happened? Did it happen when somebody else came in from the side and who was like, this guy's fucking with my boy, I'm going to stick him if it gets hairy. These guys start fighting, and then his buddy comes up, and you can build a lot of if you can just, like I said, if you just have that knowledge base, you can have a lot of great ways to train that stuff. But like I said, it takes a little bit of work on your or whoever's part to actually go and look for that information, because it's there, it's available. You can see how knives are really used on people. It's literally at your fingertips, but you have to be able to, sometimes have the guts to go watch somebody being killed. I mean, it sucks, but that's how I prepare. Yeah. Right. That's how I say, okay, say I've watched, I've got like, a little notepad file open that says, okay, I've watched 30 of these fights today, and most of them went like this. A couple of them went like this. There's a couple fringe cases that are that we can kind of discard, Yeah. But that's how you might want to. You don't have to be necessarily as analytical as that, but you've got to look at the real usage of weapons and multiple opponents and stuff like that in real life. Otherwise, you're just never going to get the right answer on how that stuff how that stuff should be trained. You know, and it is what it is.
It is, if you think of it from like a knowledge angle, it is kind of fun. It is kind of fun to like learn this stuff. Like
it's fun to know stuff.
Yeah, it's fun to know stuff, and I would say for people who are nervous about like this stuff, just kind of like put this in the back burner. Really, if you really start looking at stuff, like for a while before YouTube started really going after me for like analyzing, I was looking at some of those videos. I was like, wow, my mind's blown, because I would like, I don't know if you remember that video, but there's that one video that got taken down maybe 3 months after I uploaded, but it was a knife fight in China. The guy got stabbed like 40 times and he was still standing.
Yeah.
And then you might have been the one that actually made the comments like, wow, the human body's just weird like that. Some parts of the human body can take so much abuse. Some parts cannot even take any abuse.
Yeah.
It might have been you that made the comment. I don't know.
That sounds like a comment I would make for sure. Yeah. But there's a lot of things like that where, guys get killed, like one to the heart, it's done. And then there's a video on my channel where this like little old guy, he's like got to be like 65. He gets it in the back of the head. He gets it in the neck. He gets it in the all over the upper body. And he's still in the game. Like he fights a guy that's like probably like 30 years younger than him. And he's in there, like they're stuck in this little shop that's like a couple arms reaches wide, and he's just in there with this guy for like, I can't remember how long it is, but it's a long time. It's long, and there's a lot of people out there who are like, well, if some guy came up and stabbed you in the back of the neck, you'd be dead on the spot. And I'm like, I can literally prove that's wrong right now, because I have a show on this or that video, right?
It's so interesting if you really look at like human biology or physiology or anatomy, what people have survived. Like when I was taking neuroscience classes, there was a very classic case of a guy, he was doing construction and there was an explosion in a pipe. Phineas Ferb, says Rob, who's cooking over there. Phineas Ferb, he got a pipe through his head and it basically took out his amygdala, but he still lived. And people use that scientists use that as a great example of like showing the importance of the amygdala, because after his amygdala got taken out, he had no emotional regulation whatsoever. So he would just be so short-tempered and everything. But he's lived. Another guy, he tried to off himself. He took a crossbow and he like went like this. The crossbow went through his amygdala and he survived that too. It's crazy. Like, people don't realize there was a very classic passage in Stephen King's Pet Sematary where Stephen King was talking about how so many people, like, they try to go like this, because the movies show that when they try to off themselves. And sometimes the bullet will literally, depending on how it strikes the skull, go downwards or something. Like the human body can just take so much abuse in so many places that you think it can't take abuse. It can. It also depends on the person. Some people are just more resilient than others. It's crazy, man.
I was hoping you might bring something like this up, actually, because it's a thing that comes up a lot in like the non-sport stuff. I try not to call it street stuff because when you say street stuff, it just has that connotation. People start attaching like the bullshit to it and stuff.
Yeah.
But like one of my buddies, when you'll be watching a movie or whatever, and some guy will get stabbed, like John Wick, for example, right? John will get stabbed here in the abdomen, right? And he'll take it, and he'll be in the game for like a couple hours after that, right? Like he's still in the fight. And my buddy will be like, well, obviously you'd be dead in like 6 minutes after that. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like people have survived being like blown up with mines and bayoneted and shot with like military grade weapons multiple times, and not only stayed in the fight, but stayed in the fight for like hours, and then like took a medevac chopper out to a military hospital and survived. Like people have survived and stayed fighting through like terrible, grotesque imageries, like dismemberments and stuff like that. Like if you've ever heard the story of Jared Reston, I can't remember. He's like a SWAT cop that got into like a really wicked, like touching distance shooting, and one of the first, I think it was the first round that he took, hit him in the face, like and blew out a bunch of his teeth. Like I think it went here and came out the back here, and people were like, well, he got shot in the head, he's done. Like, no fucking way. The fight might literally start with you getting shot in the head and still being alive, and what are you going to do? You going to quit? Or are you know what I mean? Like, it's something you might have to think about. You know, the fight might start with you getting stabbed 4 or 5 times before you realize the knife is in play, and then you have to get on that, and you might only have like 90 seconds left of like, you know, to do something. Right, but you can't just be like, well, I guess I'm dead, you know.
Yeah, guys, this is why I really wanted to bring Cody on this channel, because like these are discussions that don't even really get talked about in many self-defense videos. Like many self-defense videos, like what if one guy does this to you? What happens? Remember that story I talked about? This was when Coach, one of the first videos that Coach Paris and I made. The one time I got jumped in school, right? Yeah. It started when a guy swung a kick at me. So it wasn't like it started with people being like, we're going to jump you. It's like it started when one guy threw a kick at me. He missed me. It grazed my butt. But still, it started without warning, right? I was just walking, minding my business, and some guy kicked me. Yeah. So like that's an example. You never know when it happens.
Yeah. Yeah. And like that's the thing is everybody's prepared for their fight in their mind, or you know, a lot of us have some idea of like a cool, glamorous fight, right? That, you know, where all our skills get to shine and we just dominate for blah, blah, blah. The thing is like there's so many contexts that fights can happen in that aren't cool, aren't glamorous. And that's why a lot of the fights that you see are really, really ugly, is because it's just fucking chaos. It's mayhem. Right? Yeah, Have you seen the video from Brazil? I can't remember. It's either it's like a BJJ black belt or brown belt. Yes. And he gets shot.
Yeah. He goes after a guy with a gun and he gets shot. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
I mean, that guy was prepared for a lot of fights. You know, if you're a BJJ like brown or black belt or whatever, you're a fucking bad dude. But he just didn't have that. You know, there's a lot of there's context there, right? Yeah. But his skills were not sufficient to deal with that contextualized problem. You know, he was probably used to beating the shit out of everybody under any circumstance, and that circumstance was the one that got him. You know,
exactly.
So you really got to be careful, man.
Exactly. Yeah. Cody, I think this is a good stopping point because it leaves us with a lot of great stuff to keep exploring in the future. So for audiences that tune in, probably Cody and I are going to do another one in a week. I just get this feeling because, you know, everyone's inside, and I know audience is probably going to give us a lot of questions and stuff like that. So, Cody, again, thank you so much for joining. I've been wanting to bring you on. I'm so glad, you know, one of the silver linings, the blessings of what's going on is that I finally got time to bring you on.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Jerry. It was nice talking to you for the first time, for real.
Definitely. So audience members, SundownTE. SundownTE. It will be in the description. It'll be in the end cards. Probably going to be like right up here or right up here, depending on where the card is. And it's going to be in the pinned comment. So Cody from SundownTE. If you're part of our Discord server, Cody's pretty active on there. But if you're not, just go to his channel, talk to him, or go into Discord. I haven't sent more invites into the Discord, but maybe I'll send more invites since I mentioned that here.
Yep. I like starting fights about martial arts anytime, anywhere.
Exactly. Guys, that's the truth, guys. If you're going to start a fight, just start a fight about martial arts online. That's better than actually getting into a fight. That's safer. Just don't, like, accidentally challenge some person to actually get into a physical fight. You know, please don't do that. Cody,
all right, man.
Thank you so much. I will stop recording now. We can talk a little afterwards, but I got to go to something soon anyways, virtually, because I can't go to that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, cool.
Yeah. So, guys, fight commentary breakdowns out.